A climate-induced reckoning is playing out on the Colorado River. The 1,450-mile-long river provides water to over 40 million people and more than 5 million acres of agriculture across the western United States. But years of punishing drought have reduced its flows to unprecedented levels. In response, the 7 states of the Colorado River Basin are expected to announce a plan this week to trim between 2 to 4 million acre-feet of their water use in the coming year. About a quarter of the total that flows through the river annually these days. Since 1922, an agreement called the Colorado River Compact has governed how the Upper Basin, states of Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming, and the Lower Basin, states of Arizona, California, and Nevada, share the water in the river. The agreements work in times of plenty, but strain under drought. In 2021, the deepening drought forced Arizona and Nevada to make painful consumption cuts, but it has become crystal clear that those efforts were far from enough. Water levels in crucial river reservoirs have fallen so drastically this year that even those measures, which many hoped would shore up water resources enough to squeak through until the drought broke, fell far short. On June 14, the Department of the Interior made a stark ask. Within 60 days, the river-dependent states needed to come up with a plan to make the major trims. That deadline has almost arrived. An announcement is expected Tuesday. Such deep cuts have never been made across the entire river. The magnitude, and the speed with which they need to be achieved, is completely unprecedented, says Felicia Marcus, a Western water expert at Stanford University. It's not a surprise, and it's not yet the apocalypse, but we have to be clear-eyed that we've been gambling for at least the last 10 years. And so far, that bet's not paying off, she says. Why does this matter for more than a century? The Colorado River's water has propped up communities and growth across the West. Massive hydroelectric dams created Lakes Mead and Powell and generate enough power for 2.5 million homes. San Diego, Las Vegas, Tucson, and many other cities get most of their drinking water from its flow. The river provides irrigation water that turns more than 5 million acres of arid, sun-soaked land into a place to grow food and other agricultural products for the whole nation. The river has always had times of abundance and scarcity. The dams and reservoirs along its reaches help to smooth over the sometimes huge swings, storing water from rain and snow-rich years to get through the lean ones. But climate change has upset that system. The Southwest is now in the most severe drought in at least the last 1,200 years, made 40% worse by climate change than it otherwise would be. Scientists have been telling us for years that we can expect flows to diminish by 20 to 30%, says Catherine Sorensen at the Kill Center for Water Policy at Arizona State University and a former water manager for Phoenix, and that reality has played out. The river has lost about 20% of its flow since 2000. And the trend is expected to continue as the West aridifies further. The problem is that every single water molecule that moves through the river, and in dry years, more, has been spoken for well before it even gets into the river channel. So when flows and reservoir levels drop too low, the delicately balanced water-sharing agreements struck a century ago get disrupted, forcing the Colorado Compact states to figure out how to make dramatic, and contentious, cuts. The 1922 pact was based on the assumption that about 17.5 million acre-feet of water, or maybe as much as 20 million, flowed through the river each year, enough today to cover nearly half of Utah in a foot of water. An acre-foot is enough water to cover a football field, roughly, with water a foot deep. The agreement obligated the Upper Basin states to provide nearly half that estimated flow, 7.5 million acre-feet, to the Lower Basin and allowed the Upper Basin to use up to that same amount, assuming it was still available. Under a 1944 treaty, the U.S. is also obliged to send at least 1.5 million acre-feet to Mexico, where the river historically entered the sea. But the estimates of the river's flow proved over-optimistic even before human-caused climate change began to intensify droughts. During the 20th century, the flow measured at Lee's Ferry, Arizona, the boundary between upper and lower basins, averaged just 15.2 million acre-feet. Between 2000 and 2020, that number dwindled to 12. 5 million. Scientists warn that to expect more in the future is folly. While wet years will likely come again eventually, the long-term trend in the West is toward more drought, not less. This has basically been 100 years coming, because we've always allocated more water on paper than there is in the river.